you a Christian? Is it because you go to church every Sunday? Is it because your parents are Christians? Is it because you have a direct experience of God present in your life? Or is it because you like the way it makes you feel? Atheist spokesperson Richard Dawkins says that the only reason you are a Christian is because you were born in America. If you had been born in India, you would have probably been a Hindu. If you had been born in Iran, most likely a Muslim. If you had been raised in Asia, you might be a Buddhist. What Dawkins is essentially saying is that the only reason you are a Christian is because you are a product of your environment and culture. Since the most practiced religion in America is Christianity, it was very likely that you would be one. And that's all there is to it. There's nothing really special about Christianity. It has merely been formed by a collection of stories, fables, and folklore that has been passed down from earlier generations and reflects the beliefs and prejudices of the times and places they were written in. No religion has ownership over the truth about God and the afterlife. If what Richard Dawkins says is true, then why be a Christian at all? There is an ancient parable from India that tells of several blind men. Having heard that a strange animal called an elephant had been brought to town, they individually sought out the elephant and, being blind, had to use their sense of touch to figure out what this strange creature looked like. The first blind man's hand landed on the trunk of the elephant, and so he concluded that the elephant was like a thick snake. The next man approached the elephant, and his hand landed on the ear and concluded that it seemed like a kind of fan. The next felt its leg and said that he must be like a tree trunk. Another rested his hand upon its side and said that the elephant is a wall. Another felt his tail and concluded it was a kind of rope. The last one felt a tusk and concluded it was like a spear. When the blind men gathered together again, they began sharing with each other what the elephant was like. Since all of them had experienced something very different, they began to sharply disagree with one another, which ultimately led to a violent end. The tragedy of this story is that the blind men were all wrong about the elephant, and yet they had allowed their false beliefs to pit them against one another. When it came to their own individual experiences, the blind men all possessed half-truths about the elephant. The trunk sort of feels like a big snake, and one can see how you could mistake a leg for a tree trunk. But they all were still ultimately wrong. Due to their lack of sight, they were limited to what they could know about the elephant. The point of the parable is to show that just like the blind men, each culture has limited half-truths about God and the afterlife through their different religions. So all cultures are ultimately wrong, and just like in the story, it is a tragedy that even though all cultures are incorrect, they allow their false beliefs to create worldwide hatred and hostility. Is this all true? Is everyone ultimately a product of their environment and doomed to believe in lies? Is this the reason why the world is filled with so much evil and suffering? Are we all like the blind men, fighting over false interpretations that have come from our limited experience? And what about Richard Dawkins? Isn't he a product of his environment as well? Just because he's not religious doesn't mean he holds some sort of privileged position in knowing truth any better than the rest of us. If what Dawkins says is correct, then if he had been born in India or Iran, he might have been a Hindu or Muslim. It's only because he is born in America that he is free to exercise his right to not practice a religion. So it appears as if we are all in the same position, including Dawkins. No one can know the truth about God in the afterlife because we are all like the blind men, groping around in darkness, unable to step back and see the elephant for what it really is. Unless, of course, some of us are no longer blind. Hey there! So we've been talking about the Christian worldview the past few Sundays. First, we talked about what it is, how everyone has one, and that your actions and beliefs have to reflect the worldview that you say you have. Then last week, we talked about the first belief that a Christian worldview starts with, which is God is real and there is nothing else like him. And we looked at some pretty awesome reasons to think that God exists. Today, we move on to the second belief that, if true, makes the Christian worldview more different than any worldview out there. And that is, Jesus is God, and he came here to save us. You see, the Christian worldview is the only one that believes Jesus is God. Every other worldview denies this truth. So Christianity stands or falls on Jesus being God. With that said, let's turn back to the blind man and the elephant for a second. The problem with the ancient parable is that the story ends too quickly. Let's imagine that while the blind men get into a fight over the disagreement about what the elephant looks like, a man walks into the room where they are. Now, this isn't just any man. This is the elephant trainer himself. Unlike the other men, he's not blind, and he has been with the elephant its whole life. He knows the elephant more intimately than any other person. He begins to explain to them, I'm the elephant trainer, and because I'm not blind like you guys, I can see what the elephant looks like. I have come here to tell you the truth so that you may be set free from this disagreement with one another. A couple of the blind men believed him, but several others didn't. They instead redirected their anger and fear away from each other and instead directed it towards him. They end up killing him. This then becomes the real tragedy. The trainer just wanted to tell them the truth in order that they could be set free and have peace with one another, and instead, he died for this kind and loving gesture. What if I was to tell you that Jesus was the elephant trainer in the story? You see, there's something crucial that both Richard Dawkins and the ancient parable miss. Something obvious yet easily looked over. This missing piece is that as a listener of the parable, you know what the elephant looks like, which is the only reason you know that the blind men in the story are mistaken. In other words, you have the privileged position of knowing the truth since you've seen an elephant before. This point cannot be emphasized heavily enough. The only way you can know that all of the blind men were wrong about the elephant is that you yourself know the truth about what an elephant really looks like. But this raises a problem because anyone trying to say that this parable shows us that no religion has truth has to assume that everyone's blind, that no one can see the elephant. But in order to say that someone is blind and therefore wrong about what something looks like means that you would have to be able to see the truth for what it really is. That's the only way that you can say that I'm blind and can't see the elephant like you can. It's the same reason you can't tell someone they are wrong for thinking 2 + 2 = 5 unless you already know the truth that 2 + 2 really equals 4. So the only way someone can claim no religion has the truth about God in the afterlife is if they themselves know the truth about God in the afterlife. How else would you know that no religion has it right? But what if there was a person who could see the elephant? More importantly, what if there was a person who knew the truth about God in the afterlife? Or even better, what if there was a person who claimed to be God himself? This is exactly what Jesus did. Jesus made radical claims about himself. All throughout the Gospels, we see this. Here are just a few. He said that he and the Father were one, that he is the way, the truth, and the life. that no one can come to the Father except through him, that he has the authority to forgive sins, which the Bible teaches only God can do. When speaking to the woman at the well, he told her that he was the Messiah. When asked if he was the Messiah and the Son of God by the Pharisees, he responded with, "I am, and you will see me seated at the right hand of God, coming in on the clouds of heaven." He blessed Peter for saying that he is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. He told the religious leaders that before Abraham was even born, that he existed. It is undeniable that Jesus thought pretty highly of himself. And then there is the most profound one of them all. In writing the beginning of his gospel, John started it out by talking about some mysterious thing he called the Word. Now it becomes clear very quickly that this isn't like the words used in language, but this Word is a person. Look at what he says. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. So this person called the Word was with God from the beginning, but then it says he was God. John's making a clear distinction here. He's saying that this mysterious person called the Word is God, but also with God. What's going on here? Look at what it says further in John. So the Word became human and made his home among us. So wait a second. We know a few things so far. We know that this Word person was both with God for all eternity and is God by his very nature, and then became a human and walked among us. Who is this guy? Well, in the same chapter, John tells us his name in verse 18 when he says, "The law was given through Moses, but God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ." So there you have it. The Word person is Jesus, which means Jesus is God who became a human and walked among us. So don't you see? It's undeniable that Jesus believed he had a privileged position when it came to knowing the truth about God in the afterlife. Jesus is the elephant trainer in our story. He can see what we cannot, and his main reason to come was so that he could save us by restoring our relationship with God, to give us freedom and truth, to provide an anchor for our souls. So here's the bottom line today. Jesus is God, and he came here to save you and me. In light of this, there are two types of responses to Jesus. In our extension to the story of the blind man and the elephant, there are two ways the blind men responded to the elephant trainer. Some of them trusted him and accepted that he knew the truth about the elephant, while the others rejected him and chose to continue believing things about the elephant that just weren't true. And they end up killing him. I challenge you to be like the first type of blind people. Trust in Jesus. There has been no other person who has claimed to have seen God, to know God, and to be God. Not only that, no one else has died and come back from the grave in glory and immortality like he did. Every other leader of every other religion has died and stayed dead. Jesus proved he was God by his resurrection, and it was because of this that we can be confident in what Jesus says, which sets the Christian worldview apart from all the rest. Which is why John perfectly ends this first chapter by saying, "No one has ever seen God but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." So last week we continued our month's video challenge to win the $100. Just like last week, we will be posting on our Kidsman Facebook pages one question that can only be answered if you've watched the video, and no cheating. This week's video challenge is to watch the following video called Messiah by the Bible Project. And we're going to put up the slides so you guys can have it there. We'll also put a link in the description on Facebook. Now remember, the idea is to watch this with your parents and then to get them to help you find the answer. And if you give us the answer next week, by next Sunday, then we will put your name in for the drawing to win the $100 Visa gift card at the end of the 4 weeks. The more weeks you do, the more your name will get put in for the drawing. So get to watching and studying. There's only one more week after this next one. So
We'll see you guys next week.